All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Guys, we are continuing to chug along here in in December now. It is now December. The calendar has turned over, and that means the winter meetings are coming up. And as we prepare for those winter meetings that are taking place in Nashville, Tennessee this year, I want to spend this episode trying to do what might be impossible, or at least improbable, and that is predict a big trade that Alex Anthopoulos will make that no one else sees coming. You know, we've had this happen with Anthopoulos on a couple different occasions. Of course, most recently the Sean Murphy trade last offseason. I'm taking this on, guys. I'm going to throw out some pretty interesting and some pretty fun trade possibilities for the Braves that are off the radar, not what you might see coming. Some of them might not be totally shocking. Others of them might be pretty surprising to you, or at the very least, fun to think about, dream about, whatever you want to call it. But let's get to some Braves news first. So very little of note has been going on in Braves country over the last couple weeks, but let's talk a little bit about Pierce Johnson, reliever for the Braves, who signed not an extension, actually. He re-signed with the Braves early in this offseason. And he is making a pitch to Shohei Ohtani to come to the Atlanta Braves. So I just think this is a fun thing that came out. You might have seen it on social media or other Braves news sites. But he basically said, if you want to win, he's talking to Ohtani out here. He said, if you want to win and be a part of a bunch of fun guys doing it, and then come to Atlanta. So he also promised to learn Japanese for Ohtani, and whether Ohtani comes to Atlanta or not, this wins big points in my book for Pierce Johnson, that he's just willing to say it out loud. And of course, every Brave would love for Shohei Ohtani to come to Atlanta, maybe outside of Marcell Ozuna, because that would mean Ozuna's moving on if that were to happen, I assume. But we're not going to spend too much time on Ohtani in this episode. I've already done that. You can go back to a previous episode I did on why Ohtani might be interested. He's already said, at least news reports say, that he thinks it would be intriguing to join Atlanta. But anyways, some reports suggest that Ohtani may make a decision in the next week or so, but who knows? That's not really huge news. I mean, it's probably likely that he's not going to drag this out too much longer. I kind of assume that he's probably met with most every team that is interested in him and giving him big money. So in the meantime, life goes on. The offseason goes on for the rest of us. And, let's move on to some other topics. In terms of Braves news, the Hall of Fame vote just took place about 10 days ago. The results won't be announced until late January, and there are some former Braves on the ballot of note. These guys are not new to the ballot, but Andrew Jones, Billy Wagner, and Gary Sheffield, all former Braves on the ballot. Andrew Jones is the big name simply because Billy Wagner and Gary Sheffield only played for the Braves. Wagner only 1 year. And Gary Sheffield, I think, was 2 or 3 years, and he had some great seasons with the Braves, but he wasn't with the Braves very, very long. This is Sheffield's last year on the ballot. Every player gets 10 years on the ballot, as long as they continue to get at least 5% of the vote, then they continue to be on the ballot. So this is Sheffield's last year. Some people think he might have an outside shot of getting it. I think he's been around the 50% number. You have to get to 75% to be inducted. But Andrew Jones and Billy Wagner have also been over that 50% number, and so this could be the year for them. I think Andrew still has a couple years left. Wagner's getting close too, so it's going to be interesting to see if they get in. Certainly pulling for Andrew to get in. I've shared that with you before, guys. I think he's very deserving, particularly when you look at some of the greatest defensive players who've ever played the game. Guys like Ozzie Smith and those guys who might have been a little lighter hitting. Andrew Jones has his warts in terms of his offensive career, but he still hit 400 plus home runs and is one of the greatest defensive center fielders of all time, maybe the greatest center fielder of all time. So pulling for Andrew Jones to get in this year would be awesome to see that happen. Of course, he got his number retired this past year for the Braves. number 25. So again, just pulling for Andrew Jones there. The last bit of Braves news, Braves specific news I wanted to share is kind of sad news. Not kind of, it is sad news. Legendary Brave scout Paul Snyder passed away just a couple days ago at the age of 88. And, I didn't know much about Paul Snyder. I knew the name, being a, faithful Braves fan. I've heard the name come up occasionally, and particularly just a couple of the stories that people have shared at his passing. So names like John Sherholtz, Bobby Cox, Stan Kasten, Ted Turner. Some of us Braves fans know those names very, very well and connect those names to the great Braves run of the 90s and the 2000s. But Paul Snyder actually should fit right in there with those names as basically the architects of that great Braves run. He was the Braves scouting director through much of that time period. This guy personally scouted Chipper Jones. Remember, many clubs, the Braves had the number one pick in 1990. Many clubs preferred Todd Van Poppel over Chipper Jones, and he's one of the main reasons the Braves were all in on Chipper. A lot of times Bobby Cox, because he was the general manager at the time, gets the credit for that. But he should get some credit. But Paul Snyder was a big reason why Bobby Cox could be so confident in drafting Chipper number one. Of course, Chipper becomes a Hall of Famer at third base for the Braves. But that's not the only thing, right? He signed international prospects Javi Lopez and Andrew Jones. I already mentioned Andrew possibly entering the Hall of Fame this year. He was also key on drafting Jeff Francoeur. Kind of a cool story about that. Francoeur was heavily considering going to college, and Paul Snyder basically played the intermediary and got him to sign with the Braves. If you've ever seen the movie Trouble with the Curve, Clint Eastwood's character in that movie is loosely inspired by Paul Snyder. I remember there's a scene in that movie where Eastwood's basically saying he can't see anymore, but he can hear the ball coming off the wood bat. And, from just the sound, he could tell if a guy could hit or not. And that's loosely based off Paul Snyder not being able to get into a game and just hearing the sound of a bat from a player and doing a scouting report based off of that. So anyways, Paul Snyder, great Braves scout, passed away this week. So wish his family, obviously our condolences, and he's a great Brave and in the Braves Hall of Fame. So, all right. Well, guys, let's get back to the main focus of this episode, predicting a big surprise trade. And maybe not predicting it. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that these are likely or I expect these to happen, but these are things that I'm trying to make it, it is surprising. These should be surprising. They're not the obvious trades. Like, we know the Braves are interested in Dylan Cease. So, I'm not going to go there. And yet I'm trying to make these realistic, right? Certain guys that I'm talking about in this episode, I want to throw out a realistic trade package for them. So a couple things, guys, or maybe more than a couple things to keep in mind when we're talking about trades that might be made, especially surprise trades that might be made by Alex Anthopoulos. Number one, don't forget, Anthopoulos went and got Sean Murphy last year, even though the Braves were already strong at catcher. So Anthopoulos is not scared of making a move to better the team, even if the Braves are strong already at a certain position. Now, catcher is a little unique in that you can, you can play two guys 50-50 or that sort of thing like the Braves did. But that should be noted. Another thing that, I think of is DH and shortstop. To me, are two positions that are strong, right? The Braves already have guys in place. And yet I think they're not signed super long term, and they could be, with the right player, potentially upgraded. I mean, you might disagree with that in terms of Ozuna. He hit 40 home runs, 100 RBIs last year, but he is a very volatile player year to year. You can't guarantee that he's going to do that again. And, he's only signed for one more year with an option year tagged on to the back end of that. So I do think Ozuna, with the amount of money he's making, is is one that could be traded. I'm going to include him in some of these trade packages, and I'll talk a little bit more about Ozuna later. I don't think it's likely that the Braves move on from Arcia, but it's just something that I'm noting here. All right, pitching and left field are more obvious areas that could be improved, and I'll address those too in some of these trade packages. So I'm obviously not ignoring that. We talked about it a lot already. We've talked about Von Grissom possibly stepping up to play left field, and we've mentioned a lot of the more obvious trade targets for the Braves in terms of pitching, with Dylan Cease being one of those guys. There have been further reports just today that the Braves are still in on Dylan Cease, but they're not the only team. The Dodgers, the Reds, other teams with, sorry guys, but better farm systems right now are going after Dylan Cease. So it's great that the Braves are in on that, but it's not a guarantee that Dylan Cease is going to be a Brave just because the Braves are targeting him. So if they're not able to get him, where do they pivot to next? I don't think the Braves are going to act in any kind of desperation and get a pitcher that they don't see having good value and long-term value for the Braves. All right, a few other things to keep in mind, and then I'm going to dive into each of these potential trades. So number one, I don't consider these trade scenarios to be likely. Kind of already mentioned that, but I don't consider them to be likely. By nature, if they are improbable or impossible to predict, then they are unlikely to happen. I'm having fun with these trades, so don't crush me too much. As these are unrealistic, and it's ridiculous to even bring it up. I know I'm going out on a limb here, so I am trying to present them in realistic ways in terms of the trade package themselves. But I am definitely I don't consider these to be likely, but it doesn't mean that they can't happen, right? Number two, Anthopoulos recently mentioned leading up to the winter meetings that he will not consider trading Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris, or any other, and this is how he put it, any other homegrown player that has recently signed an extension. So in my mind, that would include, obviously, Albies and Harris, who he mentioned by name, but Acuna, Strider, Olson, Riley, and Murphy. To me, all of those guys are off the board because they've recently signed long-term deals. Now, Olson and Murphy are not homegrown, but I still think with the things that Anthopoulos has said in the past, he's talked about, it's not good business to sign a guy to a long-term extension and then trade him away the next year. Doesn't look good to the rest of your players. So I don't think he's going to trade anybody who's signed an extension long-term. So I'm not including them in any of these potential trade packages. Okay, also, I'm using baseballtradevalues.com. Some of you guys might be aware of that site. Okay, I'm using this as a guide to construct these trades. This website provides trade values for every player. I realize this is a very imperfect way to do it, right? Every team is going to have their system of evaluating trades and player values. Some teams obviously might love Von Grissom and value him highly, and other teams might not believe in him at all and wouldn't even want to talk to the Braves about him. And I'm just using him as an example. But so it's an imperfect system, but it's something to work off of. And so, you can check my trades out on that website again, baseballtradevalues.com, and see the values I'm looking at and how they line up. So you can double check me there if you want to. All right. Another thing to keep in mind, major trades like this become more likely if the Braves decide to move on from any of their big pitcher acquisitions this year. Because I still think starting pitching is their primary concern, an area they would like to solve. But again, I think there could be a point that they would move on from that and pivot to other potential moves. Okay, so a lot of these fit into that. I do think if the Braves can't sign any real big names, they could pivot to like a free agent like Lucas Giolito on a 1-year deal or something like that. But obviously, I think us Braves fans want them to go out and get a top flight pitcher. I know I want that. So these are kind of, in some ways, the pivoting away from that and going to a plan B. Okay, last thing to keep in mind, the Braves could also look to trade Marcell Ozuna and or Raisel Iglesias basically as salary dumps. And I think, these guys have still a lot of value to certain teams who might be weak at DH or weak in their bullpen. If the Braves wanted to do basically pure salary dumps to open up more free agent money, that might be another thing that they would do this offseason. Again, I'm not necessarily predicting that's going to happen, but I do think it's a legitimate possibility, especially if there's a guy out there that they really want to target in the free agent market. They could also move AJ Minter. He kind of fits into that as well, as he's on the last year of his deal. I think Minter is really popular in the clubhouse. He's only making $6 million compared to Ozuna, who's making $18 million, and Raisel Iglesias is making $16 in each of the next 2 years. So Minter, I think, is less likely to go, but he is on the last year of his deal. So I guess that's possible as well. All right, so all these things to keep in mind as I go into these trade scenarios with you guys. And again, let's just have fun with this. And you can kind of picture each of these players in a Braves uniform, and some of them might excite you more than others. And I'd be interested to see your comments and see which one of these you like the best. All right, our first trade scenario is the Braves receive Mike Trout from the Angels, along with 19-year-old prospect Denzer Guzman and $73 million. So this is a lot of money coming back to the Braves. And honestly, if the Angels were to trade Trout, they're probably going to have to include a lot of money going away. Now, I came up with that to basically even out the trade values, or at least close to evening out the trade values for both teams. Let me tell you what the Angels get, and then I'll go back to Trout for a second. So in this deal, again, the Braves are getting Mike Trout, money, and Denzer Guzman. By the way, 19-year-old second base prospect with a good hit tool. But he's 19 years old, so he's a ways away from the big league. So in this deal, the Angels get Marcell Ozuna, Vaughn Grissom, and Owen Murphy. So, of course, Vaughn Grissom is going to be a popular name thrown out. I think he's probably the most likely Brave to be traded this offseason. You guys know well that I really like Vaughn Grissom, so I'm not advocating for him to be traded. But in this deal, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Angels. Owen Murphy is one of the better Braves pitching prospects, but he's still quite young, several years away, so he doesn't have quite the trade value as a Hurston Waldrop or an A.J. Smith-Shawver. All right, so the Braves are able to dump some money with Marcell Ozuna. I think the Angels very likely are going to lose Ohtani, so it makes sense that they would want to replace him in some way, shape, or form with a solid DH. Now, Mike Trout. Mike Trout is making $35.5 million a year each of the next 7 years. That's a lot of money. That's through his age 38 season. So the $73 million I'm having the Angels send the Braves is basically about $10 million per year. So that makes Mike Trout closer to a $25 million per year player over the next 7 years. Remember, Mike Trout is a future Hall of Famer. When he's on the field, he's still a great player, but he has been injured a good bit over the last several years. So it is still a lot of risk that you would take on to get Trout, but you can move him into left field. The Braves obviously have that hole right there right now, and that would be Mike Trout would be a really fun addition, and that's kind of to say the least, right? He would be a really fun addition to add to the Braves, and just the Braves would have an awesome lineup. So Mike Trout to the Braves. All right, so trade scenario number 2. The Braves go for it with a 1-year deal for Juan Soto. So, of course, you guys know that Juan Soto has been in the news. Most people consider him a lock to be traded by the Padres. So in this deal, the Braves would simply get Juan Soto. Remember, he is in his final year of arbitration. He's going to make around $30 to $33 million in his final year, so a ton of money. So in this deal, the Padres would get A.J. Smith-Shawver, Raisel Iglesias, Spencer Schwellenbach, and Daysbel Hernandez. So A.J. Smith-Shawver is the Braves' top prospect, at least in terms of prospect value. He even has more value than Von Grissom. Raisel Iglesias, I've already talked to you guys about him. This makes sense to me because obviously the Padres lost their closer in Josh Hader this year. Iglesias, they might be interested in him stepping in. This also allows the Braves to even the big financial burden of taking on Juan Soto a little bit. And yet the Padres are getting a really good pitching prospect in A.J. Smith-Shawver and another solid pitching prospect in Spencer Schwellenbach, who's probably around the fifth best Braves pitching prospect in the minor leagues. Daysbel Hernandez had a cup of coffee with the Braves this past year, a relatively young and controllable relief pitcher arm. So just another little addition to what the Padres would get in this deal. Of course, the downside to making this trade is for the Braves, you basically are just getting Juan Soto for 1 year and 1 year only. He is a Scott Boras client. There is zero chance he would sign an extension with any team. So you just have to be, would the Braves be willing to give up many years of A.J. Smith-Shawver for 1 year of Juan Soto? I doubt that. So I don't like this deal as much, but I'm still having fun with this deal, right? And just giving you guys an idea of what it would take to land a Juan Soto. All right, our third trade scenario, the Braves get a long-term left fielder and 1 year of a Cy Young caliber pitcher. So the Braves would get Corbin Burnes from the Milwaukee Brewers and Christian Yelich, and the Brewers would send over a little bit of cash for Marcell Ozuna and A.J. Smith-Shawver. So you can note that I've already put A.J. Smith-Shawver out in two different trade scenarios. The fact is, like I said, he is the most valuable Braves pitching prospect that they have, which is probably the reason why if the Braves make a big move, maybe they do make a move for Dylan Cease or someone else, I kind of expect that A.J. Smith-Shawver would be included. It's not a guarantee, but I think it makes a lot of sense simply because of his trade value. Marcell Ozuna, again, I think the Braves would want to get rid of his money, but at the same time, the Brewers are in desperate need of some offense. So they might actually be interested in taking on 1 or 2 years of control of Marcell Ozuna. So again, I'm trying to make all of these make sense for the other team as well, not just that the Braves want these players, right? It takes two teams to make these moves, and I'm trying to make them as realistic as possible. So again, the Braves get Corbin Burnes. You guys know because we've talked about him in the past. He's in his final year of arbitration, and also incredibly unlikely that Braves would be able to extend him. The benefit here is you're also getting Christian Yelich. Now, Yelich had a huge bounce back season this year. Of course, he's a former MVP, and he's still, because of this bounce back season, he's really proven to still be a very quality left fielder, very good hitter. Now, he is making a lot of money, $26 million per year over the next 5 years. That will be through his age 36 season, which I think the Braves would be fine with, especially if they could get a little cash back. So in this deal, I have the Brewers also sending $20 million in cash to even it out. So that would make it, I think, a little more palatable for the Braves to take on Yelich's big contract. Again, you're only getting 1 year of Corbin Burnes, but if you're talking adding Corbin Burnes and Christian Yelich to the current Braves roster, I think you're talking about an extremely good 2024 Braves lineup. And yeah, they would have to deal with their 2025 rotation, obviously needing to add at least 2 pitchers in that offseason, but you still have a great 2024 team. So this is an interesting trade option, I think, for the Braves. All right, trade scenario number 4. If the Braves get a top pitcher, so let's say the Braves are able to go out and get Dylan Cease, and I think if this happens, Bryce Elder becomes a little more tradable. I've mentioned this in the past. Again, I'm not predicting this will happen, but I think it does make it a little more likely. So this scenario is a little different than the others because the Braves are not trading for a proven major league player. They're trading for a top prospect who's likely ready to break into the big league. So in this scenario, the Braves would trade Bryce Elder and Vaughn Grissom to the Orioles for Colton Cowser. So Colton Cowser is the number 14 overall prospect in baseball, outfield prospect for the Orioles. This guy has a very high hit tool with power and is a solid defensive outfielder to boot. So this guy is pretty much knocking on the door of the major leagues. I think if you traded for him, obviously he'd get a spring training invite and you would be expecting him to win the left field job. Now, Colton Cowser, maybe that is unrealistic. Again, he's one of the top prospects in all of baseball. So if the Orioles said no to that, they also have another really good outfield prospect knocking on the door in Heston Kjerstad. He's the number 24 overall prospect, another, power bat, lefty. So these guys are kind of similar. Kjerstad's a little older as he was coming from college. But just the fact that the Orioles have two outfield prospect, left-handed, corner outfield prospect guys, it makes sense to me that they might decide to choose one or the other. And they are desperately in need of pitching. And the Orioles, of course, had a great season last year, and I could see them valuing Bryce Elder and the control that he brings for many years to come. So this is just another outside-the-box idea that I'm giving you. All right, trade scenario number 5. The Braves trade with the Blue Jays. And in this scenario, the Braves would get Bo Bichette, who has been in some trade rumors recently. So they will get Bo Bichette and Jose Berrios, the pitcher. And the Blue Jays, in return, would get Marcell Ozuna, Orlando Arcia, and Vaughn Grissom. So in this scenario, of course, the Blue Jays' long-term player that they get is Vaughn Grissom. And again, Bo Bichette has 2 years remaining, around $27 million. I think some of the rumors regarding Bichette might be their uncertainty of being able to re-sign him and trying to get some value from him now. Now, the Braves getting Jose Berrios, that is a contract that I'm assuming the Blue Jays would like to dump. So the Braves would definitely be buying low on this guy. He had some great seasons in Minnesota. He's struggled a good bit for the Blue Jays, though he had somewhat of a bounce back year last year. He had a 3.65 ERA, pitched solidly. His contract, he still has 5 years remaining at $101 million. So to me, if the Braves are a bit of a believer in him being able to bounce back, he's only 29 years old, that is cheap compared to a lot of the guys right now on the free agent market. So it's just another idea. It adds $30 million to the Braves books in 2024 and 2025. But again, you got Marcell Ozuna going back to the Blue Jays, so it evens up some of the money there. Obviously, it would upgrade your shortstop situation with Bo Bichette, who's one of the better shortstops in baseball. You guys know that I'm really wondering if Orlando Arcia can back up his season last year with the same type of performance this year. So I would like this deal. All right, trade scenario number 6. The Braves are going to trade with the Tampa Bay Rays. In this scenario, the Braves would get Randy Arozarena, left fielder, who has 3 years of arbitration remaining, for A.J. Smith-Shawver, Dylan Lee, and Owen Murphy. So Arozarena is a fairly pricey guy to go out and get simply because he has 3 years left. So you would probably need to part ways with A.J. Smith-Shawver and another solid prospect. In this one, I am offering Owen Murphy, who again is one of the better Braves prospects, but he is young and several years away from the big leagues. And we're also offering Dylan Lee, who has a lot of years of control for the Braves, and I think the Rays are all about cost control and controlling players for long periods of time, which is why Arozarena's name has been thrown around trade rumors as of late. All right, guys, so I gave you 6 scenarios of some big names. I mean, the biggest names, obviously, Mike Trout, Juan Soto, Corbin Burns, Christian Yelich, all big names, but all of these guys, Bo Bichette, Randy Arozarena, I mean, all of these would be really exciting to add to the Braves roster. I think it would probably jazz a lot of Braves fans up for sure. I don't know that left field is their primary area of need, right? I still think the Braves are desperately wanting to upgrade their starting pitching before any of these other things. But I also think it is at least realistic that if they're not able to bring in a starting pitcher that they really like, that Anthopoulos will pivot and he will build up the roster and improve it in other ways that he can do it realistically. So I might be, really giving you some unlikely scenarios here, but remember, part of the fun of this episode is dreaming big on some big names. And how cool would it be to see a Mike Trout or a Christian Yelich or some of these other guys in Braves uniforms?